In this video, we're going back to the earliest settlers in Halton Region. We're going to go to the small community of Norval, which is just outside of Georgetown, in the town of Halton Hills, Isqueezing Township. The village of Norval was established in 1819 as McNabville. It wasn't too long after the first settlers arrived that there was a need of a cemetery. In 1823, the infant son of Alexander and Jane McNab was interred at the back of the family property, overlooking the Credit River. This was the first burial in what we know today as the McNab Pioneer Cemetery. So I'm just walking down to the McNab Cemetery, and it is through the back of someone's property. Feels a little bit weird. It's like I'm walking into someone's backyard, but actually there has been an easement to allow access to the cemetery. So I'm just going to be very mindful with this video that I don't capture any of the personal private property. When I get to the forest, turn left. Not really any other way to go. The McNab Pioneer Cemetery. James McNab, born of Scottish parents in Barnet, Vermont in 1787. Lieutenant James McNab served in the Battle of Queenston Heights, the War of 1812, and later in the 1837 Rebellion. He settled in Norval by 1819. These McNab Pioneer Cemetery lands were severed from the home farm. One of the first burials was that of the infant son of his brother and sister-in-law, Alexander and Jane McNab. The infant died July 28, 1823. Now, before coming here today, I did read that there's the potential for an Indigenous burial ground in the vicinity. So I have to do a little bit more research on that. But it's a small area. It's the size of I don't know, maybe 25 meters wide by 20 meters deep, something like that. So it's not very big, and it's definitely worth doing some more research on, finding out a little bit more about the McNab family, finding out that this cemetery was first used in 1823. I find extremely interesting. So it's an early cemetery, it's an early pioneer cemetery. As far as I can tell, there's no church in the vicinity, so this very much would have been a homestead cemetery. Although the plaque mentions that it was severed from, that the land was actually severed from the homestead. So that indicates to me that it was more of a community cemetery. So I've got a lot more research to do on this, but I was in the vicinity today and I thought that I should come by and see. So this is it. It's really interesting. I've never been anywhere quite like this before, so definitely worth checking out. So the cemetery lands are identified by these sort of fence markers. You see here, there are no grave markers remaining. Some were moved to a nearby cemetery, but I believe the bodies remain in the ground here. I believe it was just the markers that were removed. And there were two markers that remained, that there's no evidence that these two markers were moved. So if they are still here, they would be impossible to find without major search interventions. And this is just a straight drop. Goes down, I see water below. Now it looks like I'm going into someone's backyard. I don't want to go too far, but I do want to see if there is a fourth corner that's identified as part of the cemetery. Some descriptions that I read identify where the cholera victims were buried, and it talks about outside the fence. So Obviously there's no sign left of the fence. I understand that this cemetery was abandoned in the late 19th century, so it's no wonder that there's no sign of it. So it looks like this is the boundary of the cemetery here. So there was no fourth fence post. So definitely an interesting cemetery to come see. No visible grave markers. Only some references that I found on the internet referring to the cemetery, and a reference to a plaque that was unveiled in 2007 for this cemetery. Now, one of the things that I find sad about this is I like to, when I'm at cemeteries, I like to actually say the names that I read on the headstones. Just, it's a way that the dead are not forgotten, that their name lives on, and having no visible markers makes that difficult, and not knowing who was interred here. When I was talking to the homeowner, just confirming where I was going, because it seemed like I was going into his property. It was like I was walking into his backyard, and he confirmed that there is actually an easement. So if you do want access, for anyone who wants access to the cemetery, you can follow that easement. There's no fence or anything, there's just a couple of guideposts along the way. So just make sure that you stay to the, well, it's not even the path, it's like his lawn, but just stay to the left of these little signposts so that you don't end up in his backyard. And be just mindful that it is private property just to the other side of that easement. As long as you stay to the left of those, everything should be okay. You're not going to be infringing on the homeowner's property. This is a pretty remote area. It's a dead end. Definitely one of the more interesting cemeteries we visited. I'm just going to be signing off now until we meet again.